let me start with a quote by Mr. Stanislaw Jerzy-Lek, a poet and a aphorist, but I just know him as a poet. And it says, "The window to the world can be covered by a newspaper." Can be covered by a newspaper. Sorry, technical difficulties. So I'll be the claim being responded to that print newspapers will vanish within the next 5 years. So the internet, so the opponent's secondary claim, the internet is not a primary source for local information or news. I'm going to debate that. The audiences engaged with newspaper content in print or digital platforms are well distributed throughout all age groups. And the 30-year rule doesn't apply to newspapers. So, claim one. So, my refutation is that newspapers still continue to provide a depth of information and happenings around the world. It informs people about local and regional day-to-day happenings in society. Newspapers aren't dying. Your local newspaper, your local sports, your local high school, they still have pride in picking up that local newspaper, the Tide, the Register, whatever it might be, due to the fact that there's a sense of personality. You get that serious sense of knowing what's happening with neighbors, local sales, whatever it might be. There are, as of right now, there's people that still that aren't very familiar with using the internet or using technological devices. And due to the fact that we're such a progressive society, today's technology is tomorrow is no more, right? So like today, I buy this laptop, tomorrow, something new and I have to learn. Old people don't want to do that. Old people like their newspapers. And there is an age gap. There's a college study that was conducted that shows so a local college study done by The Economist, where they did a study of 5,200 different local community colleges, showed that, yeah, national newspapers are on the decline, but local newspapers are still on the uprise. Okay, the secondary claim. So, studies have been conducted to prove that newspapers are not targeted to youthful audiences, but rather everyone, and numbers prove it. The study was done on News Media Alliance. It was done over 204,000 people, and it showed that the target audience isn't a specific audience, as the person I'm refuting said. It's targeted towards everybody. So it's, there's local car ads for the college student that is trying to purchase a car. There's local listings for the person that's trying to buy the old furniture. I mean, you name it, you have it. They target everyone. It's not driven to a specific age. And over 53.5 of them, 53.5% of those 204,000 people, they say they read the actual paper. They don't just go for the targeted media or targeted section. Okay, and my last point, the person I'm refuting specifically said that media has a 30-year rule. It doesn't exist. In an article by Harry McCracken in Time magazine, it explains that the internet was started by 1983. By those standards, the internet's old. It should have been in 1983 to right now, it's 36 years old, I think. Something like, yeah, but it would have been gone by now. 30-year rule doesn't really exist. The radio started 68 years ago, and the radio should have ceased to exist 68 years ago if we did have a 30-year rule. But people still listen to the radio today. I mean, and some of the media that's never going to die. You look at radio, you look at, the point I'm trying to convey to my audience is that newspapers are prime of their lives, and they should carry over for at least another 25 to 50 years due to the fact that there's a lot of places and places and people that still need newspapers, still need media on that platform. It's a necessity. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
I think what would also help with your looking at the ads things for selling things, you could also mention the help wanted ads.
Oh yeah,
like
yeah,
people looking for jobs.
Yeah, unemployment, it's huge. You're right.
Other than that, that was pretty good.
Thanks, man.
It's a little unclear what it is, the point is of that opening quote, and I think you want to tie it into something that you're going to be talking about, but it doesn't really get developed, and you admit that you kind of got a slow start. I don't know, like you said, that maybe it's a technical issue, or maybe it's just you weren't quite in the mindset to get started yet, but it felt a couple of times like you were not quite sure where you were going with your arguments while you're presenting them. So you want to have a little bit more certainty when you can. You do organize according to the advocate structure. You list what those supporting points are going to be. On the first point, you basically suggest that the newspapers are still going to be used, that people are going to keep reading them. But I didn't hear any evidence on that. I don't know. I don't have any data that suggests that newspapers are thriving, that their readership is maintained. I don't know what their circulation is, whether or not they're still generating revenues. We've got no data on that at all. We've got your say-so. You basically say, well, people are not, old people especially are not familiar with the internet, so they're going to keep doing that. Well, the advocate's saying in the future it's going to disappear. People who are so old that they can't operate the internet, they might very well be dead in 5 years. So we don't live in a world where the internet is unfamiliar to most people. Maybe 15 years ago you could say there were people who, I don't want to have anything to do with the internet. Today you have to do everything on the internet, and the notion that there are a bunch of people out there who are going to sustain newspapers because they don't ever use the internet, that seems to me to be a stretch. Maybe a wish fulfillment for the newspaper people. The study that you had was a little bit confusing. First of all, I don't think you're quoting it directly. It sounds like it's a paraphrase. The information at first sounds like it's it's about college newspapers, but it turns out that that's not really what it's about. It's about who reads newspapers, I guess, and what they're reading the content for. And once again, it seemed a little bit vague as to what this study is referring to, and how I'm supposed to use it in evaluating the relative health of newspapers is not clear. The 30-year rule, you do have some arguments here. You want to remind us what the 30-year rule is. That's the advocate's claim that media generally disappear, or they reach their peak within 30 years. You suggest that the internet will probably have peaked then, because we're past that 30-year point, suggesting that something else is due. I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. I do think that you have a good idea when you suggest that there are media that outlast all of this 30-year kind of stuff, and you point to a couple of examples, radio, for instance, and as being an easy illustration. I think there are probably a couple others that you can pick out. Also, motion pictures and television, they haven't disappeared, even though other media have come along. They have to change and adapt. I think, for instance, the the television industry is not the way it was once upon a time, but people still watch television, they just don't watch it the same way. I think maybe your argument should be newspapers will continue to function. They may not function in exactly the same way that they did before, but they will adapt. Will there be a physical form of them? For some, there will always be a physical form. For some, they will simply exist in a new format. But basically, the concept of the paper, maybe that's where the argument is. What constitutes a newspaper? Is it something that's actually on paper, or is it an organization of information? Is it a collection of individuals who write under a particular editorial policy? I think that might be where you could find some grounds for making an argument as well. All right, thank you.